Now, and Buchenwald existed, but as a soldier, I didn't have any information on it. In the first place, I didn't believe that the Germans could be so ruthless and brutal as to carry on an extermination camp as part of their system. And very few Americans believed that they could do something like that. But when I got there, I saw what they did, and all of a sudden I began to believe it, that this was actually being carried on in all its brutality. And so we came there April 11th, 1945, and there was a group of inmates in a half circle at the gate to welcome us in. They had about a 12-foot chain link fence all around the camp. And later on, the tanks came and knocked the fence and the gates down. But part of one person in the group caught my attention. It was a 15-year-old boy. Looked 15. He looked about 12 because he looked so small. And I later found out he was Elie Wiesel, the writer, who had been in Buchenwald concentration camp at that time. And as we approached the camp, about a half mile away, the odor was so horrible, we almost had to turn around and didn't go to see it. And when we got to it, my two companions defected out and decided not to go in. And I went in to see what was going on. In the reception room, they had all these lamps, which the head of the camp had made out of human skin, tattooed skin. And as a sort of an introduction to this inhuman place. And then at the hospital, which the inmates took me to, it showed the inmates of the hospital in barracks in a room about 10 feet tall like this one. And the barracks were every 2 feet up the wall to the ceiling. And there were sick people laying in all the bunks, floor to ceiling. And nobody took care of them, and so many of them had diarrhea and dysentery. And they would have their excrement all over the place. And that's what the smell came from. And by contrast to Buchenwald, the German people were rosy-cheeked and well-fed and looked reasonably happy, right with all this going on in their midst. And the staff of Buchenwald, each 8-hour shift was taken into the Weimar, which was the nearest town, and a new staff was brought in on those trucks to take their place. And everybody in the town knew and talked to these staff members and knew what was going on in Buchenwald. So the Germans were well aware of what was happening in their midst.